So Felicia's not here, and so I'm sort of taking her place. I'm the little guy in the middle. So just to kind of do a couple things. So how many of you know what the Residency Review Committee does? How many of you have heard of it? A little bit? Okay. And so the Residency Review Committee basically looks at all of your residency programs, and they have to meet certain standards to become accredited. So meaning accredited is like the good housekeeping seal of approval, that you meet these standards and these regulations and rules and all that kind of stuff. And so now you can go ahead and have residence. So it's like getting a driver's license, okay? And so for young faculty, so I don't know where you guys are going to go. So some of you are already pretty well set in where you are. Some of you, if you're residents, I mean, you could stay in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, or you could move out to some other places. But there are bunches of new programs who are looking for faculty. Okay, and so if you are interested in doing an academic career, a faculty career, I mean, there's lots of people, especially in Florida, who are going to be looking for you. So if your mom retired to Florida or grandma's in Florida, they will love having you there. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of point out. The second thing is that there are scads of new emergency medicine training programs. Okay? So if you look at this, 10 years ago, we had about 150 residency programs in the country. So when I was a young boy, I applied for residency. There were like about 40. Okay? At one point, I was chair of the RRC. When I retired as chair, this was 1992, there were 68. So now we have 150. So that's, you know, from 1992 to then, it's not too many. But since then until 2018, we've added 80 residency programs, 80 residency programs. So a lot of them came through with the osteopathic programs that turned into ACGME programs. HCA has, I don't know how many programs that they've applied for, but a whole bunch. And so a lot of these are programs that used to be somebody else's, but now they're becoming real programs. So the point is that there's a big, huge need for faculty. This is the current members of the Residency Review Committee. So I don't know if anyone, how many of you know somebody on, or one of the names on this list? Anyone? Okay, so the old guys do. So these guys are actually famous people. So they got on this committee because they were great teachers, educators, bureaucrats, and other type of leaders and academic type of things. So they ended up getting here, and you can tell that they came from a different organization, so the AOA or ABEM, or somebody sent them to the Residency Review Committee. And so one of the questions that I always get is like, how in the world do you actually get appointed to one of these big-ass committees? Like, how do I get to be an important person? How do I get to do all this kind of fun stuff and make decisions that affect all of your lives here? And you have no idea how, or somebody made this decision to, you know, kind of make your life more miserable. It's like, well, why do they do that, and who are they, and you know, what qualifications do they have, and how did they get there? So I thought I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But the other bigger question is like, okay, so when I move along in my career here, and before you get to be old, how do you actually get to do fun things that you want to do? Okay, so Jennifer was telling about the steps that she took to get to be where she is, and I thought that was a great story, and she, you know, changed her life quite a bit. So I can, having spent my whole clinical life in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is further north than Rochester. We even get more snow than Rochester. Actually, we don't get much snow, but it's really, really cold. And during interview season in January, something bad? I should have this more in the middle.
Do you mind?
No.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So I think the question I'm going to pose to you is, so how do you make a difference, right? So for some people, they want to be department chair. So I know Judd Hollander actually was interested in becoming department chair. He ended up even at a better job, I would say, than he had at Jeff, than he was at Penn before. So there's a lot of ways you can make a difference, and how do you find your way there? So I'm not going to actually use myself as a case study. But I can tell you this. So having done some of the stuff on the left, I've watched a lot of people, and now being an old guy, I've talked to a lot of people who've asked the same question, like how do I get to be on the American Board of Emergency Medicine? How do I get to be an editor of a book or write a chapter or something like that? The stuff on the right is what I was doing to get paid in my real life. It's complicated enough, and as Jennifer was saying, you have to kind of make some decisions in your time. And so you'd go, well, I could give up some stuff and make my life easier. But the problem is the stuff that you give up is like the fun stuff. And so you don't want to give up all the things that are new and interesting and different and do the stuff that is necessary. So I think what I'm going to suggest for you guys is you need to kind of define what you want for your career, okay? So you're in this room, so I presume that you're interested in being faculty. So you need to kind of think about that, okay? And this is your personal decision. So, if you really want to do research and you're working in the community, there's a certain pathway to follow. For those of you who are already teaching in a program, I presume you started out there, but, things could change. And so as your life changes, it's going to change here. So, all these things are important, and you have to decide. So I, at one point, okay, I wasn't going to tell you about me, but I am going to tell you about me. So at one point, thought I would be a department chair because that's sort of the logical progression. You get to be a boss of more people. And I just interviewed at a few places, and I discovered, you know what? I don't think I'd actually be a very good department chair because department chairs have to be able to stand up for the programs, and they have to collaborate, but they have to be able to do a little fighting. Okay, so you have to be able to have a tough spine and put up a fight when some other department is doing something bad to your people or your department. And I realized, I'm not actually a very good fighter. And so if I were going to get a department, it probably would get whittled away, and I would end up with kind of a bad spot and not do my partners a service. I'd be bad department chair. So I'm actually much better and much happier where I am now because I don't actually have to fight different people for different reasons. But I don't have to fight for that. Now, some of you are going to want to do everything, okay? And I have to tell you, that's okay. You can do everything, okay? You can do everything. You just can't do it all at the same time, right? So at some point, you're going to need to make time for your family, and they're growing up, and they need you, and you need to be there. And at some point, they're going to be 13, and they're not going to want you there, okay? And it's a perfect time to do something else because, even though you're raising your kids, when my kids turned 13 anyways, it was great. I felt like I was a landlord and they were living in my house, but they wanted to do their own thing. It's like, okay, I guess I have 3 little, renters in my house. Actually, they weren't even paying rent. So my suggestion is think of the things you want to do and then narrow it down. Pick a couple things you want to do. Okay? You can save the rest for later. But you might have to plan ahead if you want to move there. But pick 2 that you want to do now. And so you need to focus your effort. And so my suggestion is pick something that's clinical area, and then pick something that's non-clinical. So if you want to become kind of the group's expert on atrial fibrillation, that would be great because what will happen is that whenever something comes up, whenever there's a lecture, whenever there's a question, they're going to come to you, and you will be the group's expert on something, okay? So you should all know emergency medicine because that's who walks into your emergency department, but focus down on something. So it can be something like medical toxicology, ultrasound, something that's really formal, but it doesn't have to be. It could be like you're the ENT expert in your department because nobody is an ENT expert. You're the diabetes expert. Pick something that you really want to focus on and be interested in. And then pick one non-clinical area. Now, classically what happens is that there's 3 things that people end up doing. So you can do education, either research or operations. And so I think, you heard about the education piece earlier, the education portfolio, which is important, all that kind of stuff. Jennifer talked a little bit about the research stuff. So the operations doesn't get much play in the SAEM world, but it's important. So somebody actually has to keep your emergency department running. And so if you can keep an academic emergency department running, that's actually a big deal. It takes a certain skill and a certain talent to do that. And And if you want to run things like that, there's a need for that in academic departments too. It's not just being in the community. And then you can switch later. So we've had people who are program directors become operations people, and they, started running the department. We've had people switch and stuff like that. So you don't have to be married to that for life. You always hear someone talk about mentors, so I'm not going to talk about that because that's something you should definitely do. But and then I think you heard the story about you don't have to use a mentor that's in your place. It's nice to have someone you can talk to close by, but it has to be somebody that wants to talk to you and someone you want to talk to and trust. Okay, so. It might take you a while to find that person, and you might not find that person in your own place. Whatever you do, you should watch people, okay? You should learn from everybody. So people who are ahead of you, watch and see what path they're following and what they're doing, and try and be like them and be like the ones you like. And then you're going to watch people, and they're going to do stuff that you go, oh my gosh, they are the meanest or cruelest or most selfish or most something, and don't be like them. So pick your role models, and then pick your role models of who not to be like too. So I have to tell you, when I go to these meetings, I don't know how many of you have heard Bob Hochberger talk. He was like a president of SAEM a couple years ago. And so I've watched him run meetings, and he is the most fabulous leader I've ever seen. So, he's such an inspiration. So when you watch him, and I'm in a group, I go, oh my God, this guy is great. I wish I could be more like him. So I watch him trying to figure out, okay, now what did he do so I can be more like that? So there's a few people like that. So Bob is one of them. Lou Goldfrank is another one. John McCabe was one. So they don't have to be famous people, but there are people that really inspire you. And then you should ask for advice from anyone that you want to ask, and you should listen to it. Now, it might not apply to you, so you might listen to it and then throw it out because it doesn't apply to you. But listen to them. We talked about formal training a little bit. And what I would suggest is when you do something like that, focus down to the two areas that you kind of picked earlier, okay? So you want to focus down because you can't do everything at the same time. So focus down to the two areas that you really want to do. Now, when you're doing that, you should say, yes to everything that pops up in those areas. Because it's impossible to know what's going to lead to the next thing, okay? So it leads to something, and then that'll lead to something else, and that'll lead to something else. And I can't tell you what it will be, and you can't tell which of the things you say yes to will be fruitful, and which would be just a one-time project, and then, okay, that's it. It's sort of an interesting thing to do. You learn something from it. Now you can let go of it. But some of this stuff will move on to something else. And then, this is the hard part. Try and say no to everything else, okay? So if you're the atrial fibrillation expert in your department and someone wants you to write a chapter on hypothermia, it's like, well, that'd be kind of cool to write a chapter. But the first thing you should ask is, do you guys have a chapter on atrial fibrillation or arrhythmias or something like that? Because you already know about that stuff. You'd be much better at writing about that stuff. You've already done like 2/3 of the work of the research and stuff. So you don't have to redo all that stuff. So if you're writing different chapters about all sorts of things and you have to do all the groundwork every time, that's a lot of work every time you do a chapter. So write chapters about stuff that you know about. I should mention this is a conflict of interest. So we're writing a new Harwood Nuss edition. So if some of you need to write chapters, let me know, because we're looking for authors. And one of our goals is to have a mix of old experts and then young authors who can use this for their own personal development and stuff like that. So, okay. Then, I don't know if we've talked about this so much, but you should join a lot of things. So you should network. So this is informally and joining different groups. So, I think people in your department, of course, you're going to join them. But nationally, if you join groups and they do the same thing that you do, you will be better at it because you can steal their ideas. So steal, borrow, use everything that you can. Okay? Try and focus that in those two areas that we kind of talked about because there are a lot of things to join. and you just can't join them all, even in emergency medicine. So there are more groups to join than ever before. So one time there was EMRA, and now there's EMRA, and then AEM has their resident section, and now we have RAMS for SAEM. It's like, oh my gosh, you can't join all three of them. You have to just pick one and then be part of that, okay? At one time we had just ACEP, and now there's the AEM and SAM and other stuff, CORD. At one time, CORD was part of SAM, and then CORD split off and they did their own thing. And so that's sort of the natural progression of things, but you can't join everything. Oh, when you do something, be careful about your reputation, okay? That's really the only thing that people will know about you who don't know you very well. And so you want to make sure that if you sign up to do something, that you do it. That you have to be honorable, okay? Because there are lots of people who are not honorable, and at least some people would not want to work with you. At least I wouldn't want to work with you. And so a lot of your colleagues won't do that. So if you sign up, here's what I'd suggest. If you volunteer, do it, and do a good job, and be on time. I am pretty amazed that people volunteer and want to do textbook chapters, and then they actually never turn in anything. And then I'm forced to find and ask one of you guys, hey, can you write this chapter in a month? But, you know, I can tell you that after someone does that, people are not going to want to ask that person to do some other project. It might not be a textbook chapter, it might be something else, but like, I don't think, you know. And so when their name comes up and I'm in a group, I go, you know what? Here's my personal experience with this person. This happened. And it sort of starts to close off doors for that person. Okay? So if you can't do it, that's fine, because if you're really busy, just decline and just say, you know what? I'm really busy. I'm doing all these things. We're moving. I'm having a baby. You know, there's lots of things in your life. And say, so I can't do it now, but in a year or 2 years or whatever the timeline is, you know, come back and, you know, for the next edition, they'd be really interested for anything like that. For the next committee assignment, I really want to do this. So let them know that you're interested and when you can actually be able to do that. One thing is that, you know, you're going to disagree with a bunch of people, or they're going to disagree with you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. So if you disagree on something, just let it go and don't take it personally, okay? Because otherwise you will find as the years go along, you'll find that you don't like more and more people. I've certainly, you know, wanted or suggested things and lost a lot of votes. But, you know, I've had a good discussion with my friends. It didn't have to be over beer. It was just over lunch. But then we voted. I lost. Fine. Okay, we'll talk about something else. And you should look at it that way. So you're not taking things personally, okay? There are many people out there who are honorable, who just disagree, and we see things differently. And they should stay your friends. Oh, yeah, this thing here. This is actually really important. So there's some people who just run around and they just carry a big chip on their shoulder, or they're just, you know, egotistical. And you know what a prick is, so I don't have to tell you. but don't be that person, okay? Nobody really wants to work with that person. And it's really hard to get ahead when people don't want to work with you. And besides, you won't have any fun being a prick either. So this is the review committee as it sits. Steve Bowman is the chair, and either you know him or you don't. So this is their names again. So just to kind of close up and say, well, how do you get to be on this committee? So for these groups here, at least for many groups, this is being an example, you have to know somebody to get in. Okay, so that's still true to some extent. And not only do you have to know them, they have to think that you're going to do a good job. So for instance, I'll pick ACEP as an example. So these guys all did something for ACEP. And so we'll send out a letter from the RRC and say, okay, we have an opening. It's for 6 years. We need, you know, these things to consider. You can't come from these particular states because we already have someone from that state. We're trying to get more diversity and that kind of thing. And so could you send us 2 names of people or 3 names for us to consider? And so at least for the RRC, you end up having to go through another organization. So you have to have done something for someone. So a lot of these people, like Mary Jo Wagner, has done a lot for a lot of people. And so she could have come from any one of these organizations. It turns out the AMA doesn't know anybody. And so for these organizations that the AMA recommends, which you should do. The only requirement to get nominated by the AMA is that you're an AMA member. But the secret of the AMA membership thing is that almost nobody is an AMA member. So there's 17% of physicians in America are AMA members, okay? So it's like less than 1 in 5. And it's even lower for academic people who tend to join their specialty groups. So if you, people who ask me, how do I get to the IRC? I say, join the AMA, tell them you're interested in being on the IRC, because when they're looking around, they're just looking at their membership, and they don't have many people. So they go, well, okay, from this little pool here, which name do we want to send? So just let them know that you're interested, and that's probably the best way to do it. So a lot of these people were not AMA members for very long before they actually got appointed to the IRC. Okay, so this is just a little summary here. We already talked about all these kind of things. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. If you have questions or want to ask me, I left an email up here. But otherwise, all of you have, this is an exciting time to be in emergency medicine. It's an exciting time to teach and to grow research and to grow with it. So it's a fun time. I wish I could be here at your time and move along because the field of emergency medicine has really changed, I would say, since I started doing this. And things are actually more fun than they used to be. And I think they're going to get to be even more fun. So you're at a great time in your life and career. And if you want to progress, there's lots of ways to do it. But this is one way that I think it'll make it easier for you to do it. So questions or thoughts or comments?